What's up, PTB Nation? Welcome to episode 59 of Parking the Bus. It is the final night of the round of 16 in Euro 2020. We got another upset today. That's right. Once again, we get an upset, or at least the way we saw it was as an upset. We talked about the Ukraine versus Sweden last night for a bit, and we both thought we trusted Sweden a little bit more, but you know what? We didn't expect a Swedish player to be sent off in extra time. Extra time was definitely not out of the question, but once we saw a Swedish player being sent off today, I think it kind of threw all the momentum in favor of the Ukraine. I guess we'll start with that one. Of course, the big one is that England-Germany game, which we'll get to a little bit later on. But again, unless you're playing football in the 1970s, you understand why that's a red card. You cannot come through in a tackle and get a guy with your studs above the foot. Anything from the ankle up is a direct red card. That's the way the rules are written. End of story. He comes up and nearly breaks the guy's knee. I mean, your knee is not supposed to bend backwards. It was bent at the angle. It's bent this way. It was inverted. The guy's knee inverted. That is a red card all day, every day. And especially with VAR. I mean, when you watch that in slow motion and you see the Ukrainian player's knee bend the wrong way, I mean, he's got ligament damage. There's no question. There is ligament damage in that knee. Okay, that knee was hyperextended. Okay, so I got a comment here from DJs, who's becoming one of the number one fans of this show. He says, if that's a red card in the 90s with Maldini, the referee is going to answer. I just said, we are in 2021. We are not in the 1990s. We got. You sound like Steve Nicol on ESPN. Saying what was he supposed to do? He was supposed to keep his studs down. That's what he was supposed to do. He was supposed to keep control of his foot and not dislocate his opponent's knee. End of story. So I said I would talk about this. I tweeted about it. I think that's what attracted Leo into the chat was my tweet that said I would hit on this first. I didn't say I hit on it first thing. I should have saved it. I'm going to wait for my guest, of course, FA My Play. He'll be here shortly. We'll get his take on it as well. Let's see if he agrees with me. Him and I tend to agree on just about everything. So we both got today's matches wrong. And we both got today's matches wrong. Okay. So I know Leo's in the chat. He was right. England won. I'm going to say right now, England's going to the final. There's nobody in their way that should even be able to interrupt them at this point. Okay. To me, that match was a true semifinal. Denmark's a great story, and I'm gonna, we'll see if they can get to the semis to face England. I think England got even more help in the second match today with the Ukraine winning. That's a much better matchup for them. Okay, much more favorable matchup than would have been Sweden, in my opinion. Of course, again, if Sweden doesn't have a player sent off, we might be having a different conversation. And here we go. We got a message here from James Makes Picks. He says at that spot in the match in extra time, he basically gifted the Ukraine the pass to advance. All right, I'm going to bring in at Fade My Plays. Welcome to the show, and we've already got some hot discussion going on here. I started with the red card. I guess we're gonna probably hammer this home for a little while. Where do you stand on it?
Well, seeing as that was my only winning bet today, I wasn't unhappy to see it happen. Literally went 0-4 up to that point. But one of my bets is every single match day to have a VAR decision. And so at plus 175, I feel that's a bargain any given time in this day and age. But I thought it was, for me, I guess you could call me a Stone Age type of person, stuck in the past, a traditionalist. But in that situation, I think you should leave it to the ref on the field, because it's like you are deciding the game. And
Mm-hmm.
in those, and again, I think when you look at it, letter of the law, it's a red,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you could go both ways, but in real time, it's questionable. In slow motion, everything looks worse than it is.
Right.
Letter of the law, it's a red. And I don't know, it's just like, the end of these basketball games when they review a call on the floor about like, a charge or an offensive rebound going out of bounds, off whose hand. It's like taking like 5 minutes to review it, and then you knowing that whatever decision you make now that you've stopped the game is going to decide the game. And especially when you give it just, I don't know. I'm a fan of let the boys play, and or excuse me, let the people play. But in this situation, let the boys play. Give them a yellow. There it is. VAR coming in and reviewing it. I mean.
Maybe it's possible I'm just so conditioned now with VAR, because to me that was, once I saw the replay, like a lot of pundits, I said that's red. Maybe because I'm so conditioned of these plays being reviewed, and I was just starting to say that when you look at it in slow motion like that, it looks absolutely horrible. And again, we see his knee bend the wrong way. That I think that might have had something to do with it too. It's the old adage where the injury maybe affects the referee's decision a little bit. But again, when you bring those studs up and those studs make contact above the ankle, like you said, letter of the law, that just about always sees a red card. And referees are not supposed to take into account what time it is in the match, what the score is, where on the pitch it happened. Because if it's a VAR, it is for a clear red card a possible red card. So he went over, once he looked at it, and like you said, once you look at it in slow motion, it's gonna be a red all day. Okay, James is making a few good comments here. I'm gonna show him here. He's saying VAR has been bogus this tournament. Germany goal 2 versus Portugal is offsides, not called, and now this. Yeah, it's not perfect, that's for sure. He follows up. He's not happy about the knee. I don't think anyone's happy about that, but he lost the race to the ball. Contact was made a red. I say it is, because you still have to be in control of your body. You can't go and they talked about this in the post game on ESPN FC. Just because you get the ball first nowadays no longer means you can follow through and get everything else as well. If the studs are not pointing up, that's not a red card. That's at the end of the day what got him sent off, and it changes the game, of course.
Yeah, I agree, and it's it's one of those things where if his foot's not that high off the ground, that's never a red, but it is. There's a lot of decisions that when you look at it in slow motion, again, it looks worse than it is. But this was one of those situations where it did. His foot came up and it made contact directly with the knee, and it affected the play. And I mean, again, it's letter of the law. If your studs are raised in a challenge and you make contact, and it's deemed violent contact, then it's a red card, and that's how it has to be played. And no fault really of the referees, in my opinion, because it's like, what are they supposed to do? They get crucified if they don't give that once everyone sees it in slow motion, and they give it and they get crucified for changing the outcome of the game. So I mean, it's an impossible call because of VAR. If we didn't have VAR, you either call it on the field or you don't.
Right.
And then as soon as
it's a different game now.
Over. Exactly.
It's a different game now.
I'm very much of the opinion that I would have given the red if I was in the fourth referee. If I was the VAR referee, I would have had to give the red. And that's just the case. It's like it reminds me of the Manchester Derby a few years ago, where United came back from 2-0 down, and then very, very late on, Aguero on the break, coming into the box, Ashley Young slide tackles, and his foot hits the ball. And because he's clearing the ball, it pops up off the ball and hits Aguero square in the leg. And it wasn't called a foul at all. They went back and looked at it, and they didn't call anything on it. And it's because his foot hit the ball and popped up. And
Right.
in real time, I mean, it looked like a horror tackle. Like I was
Mhm.
watching it like, Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
And then you slow it down and you're like, oh, okay, he could not really have done anything about that. Whereas in this case, it's just, I've just watched it again and it's like that, he did everything unfortunately wrong there.
Yeah. All right. I just got a text message it's raining and my windows are open. I'm gonna step out for 1 second.
Right.
If you want, let's go to England, Germany, start with
Yeah,
the lineups, and I'll jump right back in about 30
absolutely.
seconds. All right.
No problem whatsoever. So, yes, talking about the England-Germany game. Jesus, what a game this was. Could not have been more predictable. Let's start with the lineups here. For England, you have Pickford, obviously, in goal. Walker, Stones, and Maguire at the back with Luke Shaw and Kieran Trippier on the sides of them playing as wingbacks. Calvin Phillips, Declan Rice as your holding midfielders. And Bukayo Saka, Harry Kane, and Raheem Sterling up front. And for the Germans, you have Timo Werner heading the attack. Behind him, Thomas Muller and Kai Havertz. Then you have Gosens and Kimmich as your wingbacks, Goretzka and Toni Kroos as your holding midfielders. Should just say midfielders because they don't hold shit. And Rudiger, Hummels, and Matthias Ginter at the back. And, of course, Manuel Neuer in goal. In this game, we did see, a lot of yellow cards, 5 of them, 3 for England and 2 for the Germans. Now, in terms of substitutions, you had for Germany, Werner came out, Muller, Gosens, and Ginter all came out. Serge Gnabry, Jamal Musiala, Leroy Sané, and Emre Can coming into the game. Meanwhile, for England, only 2 substitutions. What they proved to be extremely, extremely important ones, with Jordan Henderson coming on, who gives a shit, and of course, Grealish coming on to replace Saka. So yeah, those are the lineups. Basic rundown of the game. You can sum it up in 5 seconds. Is first half was trash. Second half was exactly what I said yesterday. Is that people will tout Raheem Sterling as a good player because he gets on the end of an absolute sitter that my 2-month-old baby who's screaming could have finished. And he continues to be terrible. If you watch him play the game, if you just watch him, he's running around like a chicken with his head cut off. He takes so many touches inside the box and does nothing with it. I cannot stand that he is starting over players like Grealish, like Sancho. But he's proved the difference in now 3 of their 4 games. And, you can't fault him. I thought a very, very interesting quote, my quote of the day, which is genuinely like the most frustrating thing I've ever read in my life. So I think Gareth Southgate is an idiot. I think he's out of his depth, but he's getting the job done. So, you can't really say too much. But his quote today in his post-match presser was, if I put out a lineup like that and don't win, I get fired. It's like, that is such an insane thing to say. Like, hey, I know that I'm not choosing what I should choose, but I'm hoping for the best and gonna do it anyway. And it's just like, yeah, it worked out today because you're playing again. England had their path to the final, the easiest possible path. The Germans were going to be their toughest matchup, but they have 0 defense. And if you can't score on the Germans, there's something wrong with you, because literally everyone so far in this tournament has that they've played. And I just think that he is showing how bad he is at managing by continuing to put out this team that looks so toothless. I mean, if it weren't for, and this is the other thing. So Luke Shaw didn't even play in the first match. And then he plays in this match, makes the difference, because why? Him and a substitution after 65 fucking minutes. Jack Grealish comes on, and Jack Grealish and Luke Shaw do all the hard work to set up an absolute tap-in for Raheem Sterling. Before that, no chance that was getting in. I mean, Raheem Sterling in the first half had more dives than shots. And I hate that they're continuously being rewarded for this terrible style of play. As a fan of England, it drives me the fuck insane. I want them to lose so that Southgate is fired, but they're not. So I just hope that, I don't see how they lose a game, because they're going to go up against the Ukraine. They're going to do the exact same thing. sit in, and then on some, one random break, or once the substitution comes on and there's pace on the field, break them down and someone will get a goal, like exactly like today. And then in the final, they're either going to, in my opinion, face a Belgium squad who's all kinds of injured right now. I mean, Kevin De Bruyne might not even play in his next match, or an Italy squad who, don't get me wrong, is very good, but I don't think as good as this England team. And so that'll be their biggest test, but it won't be till the final. I think if you're an England fan, you are fully expecting right now to bring it home.
Yeah, you can tell that a weight is off of their shoulders now, getting past Germany. And I think the key was, like you said, it was Grealish coming in. And what I noticed was Sterling going to the right made all the difference in getting him out of that left channel, because all he does in that left channel is dribble center, dribble center, dribble center.
Ridiculous.
He had one good smack in the first couple of minutes. And I was shocked that they didn't know he was going to do that. But he came from the left, he went center, and he fired one. Neuer made a nice save on it. But after that, it was the same play over and over. And I think as you've said, what's obvious is he's a much better player without the ball than with the ball. He makes the right runs in space, and that's why he gets on the end of these tap-ins. But this one was it started with him, but he didn't know what to do, so he played the ball square. And it ended up on Grealish, who played in the overlap to Shaw, who slid it across goal for Sterling to push it in. And it was interesting because once he goes right, I think on the right side, he can do a little more for you, because if that inside right-footed shot from the left channel isn't on, he just keeps trying to do it again and again and again. And I don't know if I'm assuming that Southgate made a decision to move him to the right and put Grealish on the left when Saka came off. So it's almost like he's tripping over himself, and I'm talking about Southgate tripping over himself and like stumbling onto the right decisions here. Is what it looks like.
I mean, and the interesting thing is, and don't get me wrong, I'm not a manager. I do not have his playing history. I don't have his managing history. He knows football a million times better than you or I ever will. However, it's just like, I find it so telling when English fans, gamblers, the pundits on ESPN, on BBC, on ITV, everyone is being like, what the fuck are you doing, Gareth?
Yeah.
And like, even today after the match, in the post-match coverage on ESPN, they're like, we feel like he got more lucky than anything else. And you brought it up so interestingly, is Raheem Sterling scores a sitter, but he was out of position. He was on the left, and he was supposed to be playing on the right. And it's just like,
he drifted into that.
He drifted over into that left side, and then he happens to be there. But if you watch, I'm bringing up the replay, like I'm looking at it right now, and
if I remember right, Harry Kane is in position to tap that in as well, isn't he?
Not just Harry Kane, but if Sterling doesn't touch it, Kane taps it in on the line. It actually might have been going in even without that touch. And then if Kane doesn't touch it, Trippier is right behind it. So it's like Sterling just, again, goal poachers are important. Don't get me wrong. I'm not taking anything away from that at all. But I just think like they're just skating by, barely doing enough. And then of course the second goal comes from, Germany being forced into throwing everyone forward, and they have, a tragic back line and all of that. But I'm not convinced by what I've seen, and it seems like very few others are, but until they lose, we all have to kind of shut our mouths. But I can't understand why Sterling continues to be the like focal point of his offense, and nothing happens until they bring in other people.
Right. Yeah, and James says here, he says, give me Grealish and Mount in the middle. These holding mids are doing nothing for me. Yeah, that's, again, the pundits have talked about this too. Southgate, they're saying he's playing scared. He's stacking that double holding mid. Mount wasn't really fit to play today, so he had been in isolation. He was eligible, but not at his best, so that's why he didn't play. Otherwise, we probably would have seen him in there. But yeah, they keep going back to these decisions. And Steve McManaman said England have a better team on the bench than they do on the pitch at the start of the match.
I mean,
Which that's a resounding statement.
yeah. And I haven't heard a single person, fan, pundit, anybody that honestly says this is the team. This is, oh man, what decisions he's making. Well done. Like nobody seems to support this style of play. It's so interesting that it seems like it's just blanket hate for the way that Gareth Southgate's setting up the side, yet they're getting the results. So, nobody can really say anything, but people are continuing to do so. I mean, I counted it. I was just going mental watching this game. Like I bet against England because I waited until the team sheets came out and could not believe that yet again, they're just going to sit in and let the Germans attack. It's just wild to me. Anyway, lost them. So fair enough. Again, my England futures are looking good, but there were two different points in the first 10 minutes, where the entire England 11 were behind the ball, including Harry Kane, including Saka and Sterling. And it's like, that is the easiest type of football. That's why Germany looked so dangerous in the first 15 minutes, was because England was sitting so deep that they weren't worried about a counter at all, which is how you break down Germany.
Right.
And so I don't know. Again, they're winning, and I can't believe that they are, but they look so trash.
It could have been so different too if Timo Werner puts away his chance, and then you have the sitter that
what a surprise! Werner missing a goal in England.
That Thomas Mueller misses his breakaway that actually Sterling sort of set up for him on a poor back pass that went to Havertz instead of to an England player, and then he played in Mueller, but he couldn't finish. He put it wide, and the old Thomas Mueller would have finished that, I guess you could say.
The young Thomas Mueller, at least.
Yeah, the young, the former. But that miss right there was like we said yesterday, right? Switzerland misses the penalty kick, and France come down and punish them immediately. That's what happened there. Germany missed the opportunity to go level, and minutes later it's 2-0. As they basically do the same play again. And they do the same overlap, same ball out to the left, comes across again. This time Harry Kane heads it in, beats the offside trap. 2-0 game set match. Wembley goes crazy because you can just sense the relief in the fans. God, listening to the pregame and listening to all of the coverage leading up to the game the last couple of days, it was obvious these England players are, and this is a good thing, are clueless to the history between England and Germany. And Southgate said he likes it that way. So while everyone else is talking about 1996 losing on penalties or 1990 losing on penalties, one of the players is saying, I wasn't even born yet then. What does that have to do with this? And I think you're seeing a change in attitude in players. And you're seeing a change. We've just seen a season where it's like the teams in droughts all overcame their droughts this year. So it's almost fitting. It's starting to look like it's going to be fitting if this is the year England win a trophy in the midst of a pandemic, in the midst of now let's be fair. If they win this competition, they'll have played 6 out of 7 games at Wembley. Not even in their own country. They're staying in the same city for the majority of the tournament. They will be going to Rome, which ironically they're going to Rome and Italy is going to Munich, which has me scratching my head the way they set up these quarterfinals. But they're going to see the Ukraine. I think that's a better matchup than Sweden would have been.
100%.
Yeah, I think so. I think things just seem to keep going right for them in this tournament.
100 again, like I said, I mean, they have been gifted the easiest possible. Like if they don't win the Euros, it's a massive failure because they don't have to do anything. Like they face the Ukraine. Let's assume that they win that because they should destroy the Ukraine. Let's assume it's a classic Southgate 1-0, 2-0 victory, right? Then who would they play after that? They'd play the winner of
Denmark and Czech Republic.
Yeah, and the Czech Republic. Of the teams left,
You can't ask for a better situation in a
and then let's
semifinal.
assume they beat, whoever comes out of that, which I assume will be Denmark. Let's assume they beat Denmark. Then they're facing either Belgium or Italy.
Yep.
And like I said, Belgium has loads of injuries. Kevin De Bruyne might not be playing in the next game. He might not be able to play again.
Right.
And, Italy would be their toughest out, but they wouldn't have to face them until the final.
Right. And they'd be at Wembley for what it's worth.
And to be at Wembley, which would be huge. Like, don't get me wrong. I want England to do well overall, but it sucks to see like a team that could just be doing it with so much class and excitement and just like seeing them go win these games in fantastic fashion, but oh well. I mean, it was a great second half for them and well done. And I don't get it. I do not understand the team selection, but it's working. So who am I to say anything different?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, we both got this one wrong when we talked about it last night. I expected better from Germany. I don't know why. I think maybe I valued history too much. I don't know. It's possible.
I just am fading Gareth Southgate in my mind every time. Because like, what the fuck are you playing at starting? And I rate him. I do. I think he's a very, very good player. But Bukayo Saka over Jadon Sancho and Marcus Rashford and Phil Foden.
Yeah.
Like, are you serious? What the fuck?
Yeah.
And then you sub him off and then you start doing well. Like, it's like the first half, they're just saying, we're not going to do anything. Don't worry. And then the second half, then we'll start to think about scoring. But it's just like, that's such a good point. You have a better team on the bench than out there. But I mean, the idea that Phil Foden, Jadon Sancho, Mason Mount, we know about with the health thing and all that, Jack Grealish, Marcus Rashford, all sitting on the bench in favor of Saka, in favor of,
Sterling,
Calvin Phillips and Declan Rice as holding midfielders.
Right.
Like, I mean, Jesus Christ. But it's working.
Exactly. It is. You can't. What are you going to do about it? I mean, he's obviously on a roll, and his situation, not so much the performances or the style, but the way it's playing out is reminding me so much of Portugal 5 years ago, and the way Fernando Santos was just getting criticized every step of the way. Nobody liked his selections. Nobody liked his style, yet they continued to progress. And this is kind of reminding me of that just in the public perception realm, not so much the football because they're playing a different brand of football. But it's just every match we're all looking, even the most neutral of fans is looking at the England team sheet every match and saying, come on. Everybody's got somebody they want in there that's not in there.
Well, and I would love to know, like, from a genuine learning perspective, why do you think that this selection is better than, using any of your other players? For example, use your exact same formation, your exact same game tactics, but instead use Sancho instead of Saka.
Right.
Instead, use Rashford instead of Saka, or put, Sterling in the middle and he can float around, and you put Sancho and Saka on the side of that because of their pace, or Sancho and Rashford because of their pace, and Sterling can float around in the middle. Because Harry Kane, I mean, he's sitting more behind the ball than anything else. It's, and fair enough, like, he's doing what he needs to do, but it's just, I'd love to ask Gareth Southgate, like, why aren't you playing your best players in the positions that you have? I'm not saying change your formation, just play the best players for those positions.
Right. The only time we've seen Marcus Rashford was when he came on for Kane and played as an out-and-out striker, which
again is not his,
is not his game. Yeah.
And in a match where they were already up, so they were just sitting deep, and just like leaving him in no man's land.
Right. Exactly. Harry Kane gets on the board. He misses one early though. He has it pickpocketed from him.
That Hummel's clearance though, heroic.
Was it just me, or did it not look like it took Kane an hour to like wind up and shoot that too? It just looked like it went into slow motion. That almost like he couldn't believe he had dribbled Neuer that easily, and then he's like, "Oh no!" But
Yeah,
then,
I
yeah,
mean,
Hummels
I
comes
think
in and tackles it away.
I think his touch around Neuer was like uncharacteristically heavy. Like he
Mhm.
took the ball away from himself a good couple
Yeah,
yards more than he needed to.
which
Uh,
allowed for the tackle.
yeah, but I mean that was a great buildup as well because
Yeah,
you have Sterling pick up the ball on the left, like you say, drive straight to the middle with four defenders around him, and
waiting
classic
for him. Yeah.
Sterling. Hey, what am I going to do? Oh, I'll just dive. I won't pick
Yeah.
my head up. I won't look for a shot. I won't look to pass. I will literally drive into four people, and then right when I get near the box, just go down.
Hmm.
And by luck, it came out to Kane on the attempted clearance.
Hmm.
But it's like that's not Sterling's game. He's used to playing with one of the best passing teams in the world,
Right.
where all he has to do is get the final pass and shoot,
Yeah.
or take it down the wing, drive into the middle where he has 12 different options because Pep Guardiola sets his team up like that.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
you don't see that here. And again, he just keeps driving into trouble
Yeah, I
nonstop.
agree. All right. Anything else you want to say about that game before we move on?
The only other thing I'll say is I cannot be emphatic enough about this. If England do not win the Euros, it is
Mhm.
a failure entirely because they have been set up so easily to get to the final.
Mhm. Yeah, there's a lot of pressure now. The pressure just beginning for them because now they're favorites. It's a whole different animal
Massive
than
favorite.
when you're going in as an underdog and you can rally around that. Now
Yeah.
the other teams are the ones rallying around playing you, and especially I could see the interesting one for me would be if it happens if they see Denmark in the semifinals. I think it could be
Yeah.
interesting. I think their talent will ultimately prevail, but I think Denmark, because they are such a strong unit
Mm.
and because they have such a good, like Switzerland, have such a good identity in the way they
Yeah.
play. They can, whether they're playing well or not is less important because they all know what they need to do. And when
Mm.
they don't play well, they simplify. And it's easy for them to do that because they don't rely so much on individual talent. It's a
Yeah.
system. It's a team knowing each other. It's specific movements that they all know who's making. So
Yeah.
when things are hard, it's easier to play that way because you simplify and you just kind of play your way out of a slump. So it could be
Absolutely.
very interesting to see that match. I'm hoping that's what we get is an England Denmark
Oh,
semifinal because
100%.
I think that is the most interesting matchup we could see on the road to the final at least.
Yeah, and also, you know, I don't begrudge England. Like I don't in any way. I would never
Hmm.
say that they're a bad team. They're a fantastic team. I would argue they're a top five team in the world with the
Sure.
talent that they have. But one thing that may come into play here and isn't an excuse, but is legitimate, is the fact that almost the entirety of the England squad, almost not all, but almost the entirety of the England squad plays in the Prem,
Hmm.
and that is not only the hardest league in the world. It has the most. It has the most league games in the world.
Yeah.
They have three different domestic competitions in the
Right.
League Cup, the FA Cup, and the other one. Fucking, I don't care what it's called. Anyway, and then on top of that, all of your top players play for teams
Yeah.
that play in the
In Europe.
Champions League or the
Mhm.
Europa League. So I can understand how these players would be gassed by the time they get
Sure.
to the final. I don't think that'll really affect them, but I do genuinely believe like this is a team that has seen so many minutes in the last 6 months that
Hmm.
that could become a wear and tear type of situation against a team where you have against Denmark. Most of your players are playing in 30 game seasons
Yeah.
with very little European play and maybe a
Hmm.
domestic cup in there. So they have a lot more fresh legs. And also, like you
Yeah.
said, the underdog role is fantastic, and that's why teams win so often as underdogs, is
Yeah.
because
It's
the
easier to
adrenaline, the
play with.
push, yeah, and
Hmm.
those extra minutes to be like, hey, we have a chance to take down Goliath.
Hmm.
That's a real thing.
Yeah, and like you said about the fatigue and the fixture congestion, I think that's why he rotated the squad so much in the group stage, and why he was managing minutes the way he was. It felt like a
Yeah.
preseason, the group stage. And again, if they continue like this, he had it right. We can't doubt him because if everything works out, then it was his plan that nobody understood or nobody
Mm.
agreed with that ultimately, came to fruition. But yeah, you're right. They play more matches in the Premier League, and they play more physical matches in the Premier League. 38 matches in Spain is not the same as 38 matches in England, for example.
No, not at all.
It's a much more physically demanding league.
And England has more. I mean, straightforward, England has more talent top to bottom.
Yeah,
so
I agree
you
with that.
have, the average game against the bottom of the league
is
not just a gimme like it is, when Real Madrid plays Espanyol, newly promoted.
Sure.
It's not the same as, when Manchester City goes out and plays Burnley,
Norwich
or
City,
when they play, Fulham, who's trying to stay up. It's like they give you games, and they're very talented. And again, it's the most physical league in the world as well. So it's that extra tax on your body.
Yeah, even the teams in the relegation zone are loaded with international players in the Premier League. So it's not like, and in Spain, it's a more technical game, which is less wearing on the body over 38 matches. And you don't see the 5-6-0 results in the same volume in England, obviously, because it's harder to do that. And teams just, when all else fails, will play you more physically. They will force you to, take a beating in order to beat them. So, yeah, I definitely can see that there could be some fatigue, but it looks like he's managing it. Although I think Harry Kane looks just completely spent, and I think a lot of it also is his future is hanging in balance, and I'm sure his mind is on it as much as he tries not to have it. It's hard to focus. Every ex-player that has talked about this has said it's impossible to completely put that out of your mind while you're at a tournament. And again, I think Sterling is also, I think he's lost a lot of his explosion, and that's why he's just dribbling into walls of people now and making poor decisions. He's relying perhaps on a not so much a speed, but on a fast first step that's not there.
I would wonder. I had this thought today, and I think it's a hot take in terms of it is very, very unlikely, but I can see a world where City are loving seeing this good press that Sterling's getting. Because I'm not saying he's a bad player at all. He's a very, very good player. But if you really break down his gameplay so far in the tournament, it hasn't been good. However, because he's scoring game winners, everyone's saying, God, Sterling, and the love is all there. And they try and move on from him, especially with Grealish coming in. And they're like, hey, let's use this moment where Sterling has all these plaudits and all these people saying how amazing he is and see what we can get for him. Because if they bring in, Jack Grealish, and if they bring in Harry Kane, I mean, Sterling doesn't need to be there. They have so much talent around those guys already, and Grealish can, in reality, play as a immediate replacement for Sterling.
Oh yeah, I absolutely.
He doesn't have the pace,
a better one.
Yeah, I mean, I'd take Grealish over Sterling any day of the week.
And I mean, imagine Grealish with that type of support around him. He plays well at Aston Villa, but imagine him with a De Bruyne to give him the ball in good spaces. With a Gundogan, if Harry Kane is the striker playing, that he can look for on Sir. I mean, I think you're going to see a whole new level of Jack Grealish if he goes to
Unfortunately, I 100% agree with you.
Yeah, I know.
It sucks, but I think City, especially if they sign Kane, just because they haven't had a big striker in the middle since, the Dzeko and Balotelli era.
Right.
And when you are in the Pep system and it's about efficient passes and having your pass accuracy, above 85%, having a big head to get balls into, or having a guy that can do extremely good hold-up play inside the box is, priceless. And Harry Kane offers that 100%. So I think they're going to be dangerous as all hell. And if other teams don't sign a couple of big players, I don't see how City don't fall behind.
Yeah.
But you know what they won't do? Win the Champions League.
Yeah, I mean, they had as good a chance as any this year. And again, it not really a topic of the show, but Pep gets to these finals and all right, let's change the way we play. Let's sit back and let's play without a striker. Let's pretend it's Barcelona 2011 and just try to pass it into the goal. And Chelsea were ready for that. But all right, let's move on to the other match, the later one, which, funny enough, the commentator Alejandro Moreno said, let's be honest, nobody was thinking about this one. This is the forgotten round of 16 match. And my first thought was, yep, that's why you're the one commentating it. It was so Sweden versus Ukraine, and I got the lineups here. I'll start with the Ukraine playing 3-5-2. George Buskan is the goalkeeper. He had himself a pretty good performance today. Ilya Zambrani, Sergei Krivstov, and Mikola Matviyenko in the back. The 5 in midfield, we have Alexander Karavev. We have Sergei Sordochuk. We have Taras Stepanenko, Mikola Sharpenenko, and Alexander Zinchenko, who had a pretty good match today.
I would say so.
City had a pretty good. He had a really good day today.
I mean, if you think about the City players today, Zinchenko, Harry Kane will be one. You have Grealish, who pretty much set up the goal, and Sterling to score it. I'd say they had a good day.
Yeah, certainly. And then Andrei Yarmolenko and Roman Yerminchuk up front. Sweden, Robin Olsen's in goal. They're playing old school 4-4-2 with 2 straight lines of 4. Mikael Lustig is the right back. Lindelof and Danielson, the center backs, and Ludvig Augustinsson is the left back. Sebastian Larsson's the right-sided midfielder. The double pivot in midfield, Christopher Olsen and Albin Ekdal, with Emil Forsberg playing down the left. Alexander Isak and Dejan Kuvalevsky up front. So we see Kuvalevsky inserted here. Another good game from Forsberg too. I'm a huge fan of this guy.
Yeah.
And James had said this earlier. I waited to put it on the screen. Let me pull up his. He makes a point here where he says if Forsberg just finishes a smidge better instead of hitting the woodwork twice, they win in 90. Absolutely. Yep, and the controversy never happens if we never go to extra time. But again, these matches are decided with these tiny details. And
I mean, you could say the same because the Ukraine hit the woodwork as well. I mean, I would say it was a much more open game than I expected. We talked about this yesterday, that you have this fantastic defensive tactical display from Sweden in the group stage. And then it seemed to just go out the window. I mean, pretty much from the first whistle, it was attack both sides.
And we talked about yesterday how these teams aren't that accustomed to going into these later stages, and we didn't know how they would react. So they reacted by playing more open, ironically, which you would expect the opposite. You'd expect nerves, and you'd expect them to play a little bit more pragmatically and say, all right, let's not concede and let's get towards, the second third of the match before we start to really take any chances. But they come out. Zinchenko scores a nice brace right in the 27th minute. And that one shocked me a little bit because I wasn't expecting Ukraine to get on the front foot. Like I said, I trusted Sweden more. I think we agreed on that yesterday. But in the end, they fall behind only for about 15 minutes, but they do fall behind. Forsberg levels in the 43rd. And then we go to extra time, as we know. And we have the key controversy, the red card that we started off the show talking about. Again, I think we've kind of covered that from everywhere we can. The referee, again, once he goes to the screen, there's no way you watching that in slow motion and not showing a red card. Like you said, I think he'd be absolutely run out of the tournament if he didn't. His hands are kind of tied in the fact that the VAR official had him look at it. So,
100%.
But again, 120th minute plus 1. Dovbyk gets the winner, and it was a shocker, really, because both teams were ready for penalty kicks. Shevchenko is got the pad of paper out, figuring out which 5 are going to shoot in what order, and all of a sudden looks up and sees that his team have scored, and the Ukraine win their first ever knockout match. So yesterday we had Switzerland win their first knockout match since
Yep.
1938. I mean,
It's
I
not the
told my
end.
son
There'll
that
be
last night, my
yeah,
5-year-old, and he goes, "Oh, how old are they?" I go, "No, not these guys. First, the country." But
yeah,
and then today we get the Ukraine to win their first ever knockout match. So we have a few surprises in the quarterfinals, to say the
yeah.
least.
I mean, there, and there's always going to be. It's fantastic for them to get through, and I think what's great about the Ukraine though is that even though we were touting, Sweden as the probable victors here, yesterday we were saying, I can see a world where either win.
Sure.
The Ukraine showed a lot of fight and the group stage, and they showed that they do have, great ability, and they do have some fantastic players. I mean, Yarmolenko
really do.
especially. They have a lot of ability on their squad, and something about the pardon me, something about the Eastern Bloc. I mean,
Yeah.
they have such a drive that, like, a never say die type of attitude that you see a lot of other teams when they go down, or they let in a bad equalizer or something like that, they just deflate. We saw that very, very much with France. I just think, not to get back on that horse, but I think that, it's fantastic to see the fight in these teams. It's fantastic to see what these guys are doing, with their backs against the wall. And I think the group stage was, as all group stages are, they're just playing to get through to the next round. But this round of 16 has been, after the first 2 days of games, has been fantastic.
Yeah, no doubt. What's real fun too about a team like the Ukraine is that there's not many household names in this team. So that's another reason we kind of don't rate them all the time, maybe where we should, because we're not as familiar with these players. It's 2014. It's impossible to keep up with every single team. There's not that Sweden is loaded with household names either, but there's a few more of them there.
Yeah. And I would say probably about the same in reality. I mean, Zinchenko obviously and Yarmolenko for sure, but I think passionate soccer fans would know Ramchek, and but yeah, I mean, and like a household name, I think for the most part is Seb Larsson, but he's also been with the Swedish national team for what seems like 15 years now. He's not exactly a young man, and Emil Forsberg very much
36 years old.
Yeah, so I think that's the good thing about this Ukrainian team, is that they're relatively young, but also they're just, I mean, they're clinical when they need to be. I was impressed with what they did. I did not see that coming after the equalizer for Sweden. I thought Sweden had the upper hand in this one, and run a play they kind of did, but at the end of the day, all that matters is the final scoreline, and Ukraine made it count.
Yeah, and hats off to them to advance. Now they get a chance to play England. We looked at it from the other side. Now we look at Ukraine and how they're going to approach. All the pressure's on England. So that's the first thing they can come in feeling comfortable about is England have to beat them the way that, with public perception, and they can be a bit more patient, because what's going to happen is on this game, England are going to be expected to dictate the match more. I don't think there's fans will tolerate them sitting back as much against the Ukraine, especially in a quarterfinal. Of course, they may do it anyway.
That's like one of my favorite things, that it's just, again, it's so England, is at Wembley. There has not been, there haven't been like great opportunities to be excited at Wembley, on the international stage in so long. And you have England fans booing the England players when they're being too defensive. And don't get me wrong, I mean, we're all doing it at home as well, but it's just like England fans are so ruthless because they've had their hearts broken so many times and in such stupid ways. And with this team selection that you see with Gareth Southgate, I think a lot of people are just waiting for this implosion. And I mean, it's hilarious. Not even 10 minutes into the game, they're booing the English players, being like, move forward, please do something other than just sit on the ball.
and I don't know how many will be in the stadium in Rome. They've had smaller crowds than London
Well,
has.
the English aren't allowed to travel, so
Right, and
probably
there's a travel ban. So
there.
unless they're already in Italy, and I'm sure there'll be a pocket of them, but for the most part, it could be a quiet afternoon. So that might even work into England's favor a little more.
Yeah.
So they're
Yeah, I
not going
mean
to
there'll
feel the
be
same
the exact
pressure to
same
go
amount
forward.
of there'll be
Yeah,
the same amount of Ukrainian fans as English
right,
fans. So
exactly,
I think they'll
exactly.
be
It'll be
just
all
fine.
locals. So
Yeah. But
um,
I would bet you that the locals will be 100% for
behind the
Ukraine.
Ukraine, absolutely, especially the way, um, especially with we'll already know where Italy stands by the time England takes the pitch.
Yeah, I mean if
But if
Italy goes
Italy's
through,
still in it and they're on a collision course for each other, they're going to really be behind the Ukraine.
yeah, it's I mean, and it's really exciting, I think, for Italy because don't get me wrong, I mean, we're talking the bajillion times harder side of the bracket,
Yeah,
but they're set up for a pretty solid run because unfortunately there have been, those injuries to Belgium and Kevin De Bruyne, even if he plays, is not 100%. So, you never hope for injuries, but that's pretty positive
yeah,
for the Italian hopes. And
yeah.
then they play a very weak Spanish team,
Mm-hmm.
or
By
they
their
play
standards, yeah.
a Cinderella story in Switzerland. That,
Mm-hmm.
don't get me wrong, that's dangerous, but at the same time, you'd rather be playing Switzerland than playing the Netherlands or France
Or
or
France that's
any
firing
of
on
these
all.
times. Yeah, exactly. Like, can you imagine you choose between Switzerland
Yeah,
and France? It's like, yeah, Switzerland will have a lot of fight in them, but
but I'll take that
10
every
times
day.
out of 10, I'm taking the Swiss.
Dave here says, I can't see England going with 3 central defenders in the next round. I don't see it either. I think that was specifically done to face Germany today and to cancel out Germany's attempt at trying to overload the flanks.
Yeah, I mean, but also
Because the
Gareth
wing backs
Southgate.
were backs also.
Yeah, I mean, they were just backs. Like, it
Yeah,
wasn't really three at the back, it was five at the
it was
back.
5. And
And any time that one of them went forward, the other one sat pretty deep
mhm.
in terms of like they'd push a little bit up the pitch, but it was nowhere near, uh, considered attack. But
Right.
I would in general agree. I think against the Ukrainians, it's not going to be the same formation, although again, it's Gareth Southgate. It could be. But as we saw,
He'll still have a double holding mid, I'm sure.
I mean, I just don't know what to think because of the fact that the Netherlands beat the Ukraine pretty handily. I mean, yes, they let some goals back in, but the way you defeat the Ukraine
Mm-hmm.
is the same way that you break down the Czechs, and the same way you, for the most part, break down the Germans, and that is pace on your wings.
Mm-hmm.
And that's exactly what happened today. Look what happened when you had freaking Luke Shaw charging down the left wing behind Jack Grealish. Oh, look at that. There's no one covering
And
you.
they combined. It's like,
and it happened twice. So I think the logic says you play with, a back three and wing backs and then have attacking midfielders, or you play with a more classic, 2 central defenders, a right back and a left back
right.
that occasionally go forward, 2 holding midfielders, and then pacey players on the wings. But Gareth Southgate refuses to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Don't get me wrong, Saka's very fast, but he can't be the only one. Otherwise, they know who to key in on. But it's like, unless he plays Saka and Sancho or Sancho and Rashford or, one of those type of things. And I'm not saying get rid of Sterling, put him in the middle. Fine, do that. But I don't see him changing to that because it's been working the way he does it. But the Ukraine is going to sit deep.
Oh, yeah. They're going to be very, very patient, very disciplined.
Like, they're not going forward like Germany did.
No, they're not going to be left exposed. And they will sit with 5 back if they have to make sure you don't get that overlap and don't get that service in. So I think it could be a very interesting matchup, and especially because England's getting out of the comfort of Wembley. Weather could be, it could be much hotter in Rome as well, which is something they'd have to deal with. The temperatures, for the most part, have been pretty comfortable in London and in Glasgow. So
yeah.
I
mean, I think that it's gonna, again, like, I have futures on England. I'll probably put another one on now that they're through Germany because I believe they're the best team left in this tournament, and they should,
the healthiest.
Yeah, they should just roll straight through the Ukraine.
Mm-hmm.
and roll straight through either Denmark or the Czechs. There is an opportunity. There is a way I see the Ukraine, making it interesting, and definitely Denmark if they go through, and maybe the Czechs as well. I don't see that as much, but yeah, definitely Denmark. But I just get this feeling like it's going to be the exact same setup, and we're going to see them hold the ball behind their freaking in their own half, and then try and dribble into trouble and create. It's going to be the exact same game script we've seen for all 4 games. No matter the opponent, they do the same thing. They did it against Croatia, the Czechs, the Scots, and now the Germans. All 4 games, the exact same play style.
Yeah.
And it's worked, so why change it? And I don't see it changing, and I think they'll go through, but I don't think we'll see some kind of fireworks of like, a 3-1 type of game or a 4-0 or anything like that. Either. It'll be low and slow. And I'm calling this right now. If you could put a prop on it, I would. I'll bet in some moment of insanity in the 77th minute that we're going to see Jude Bellingham instead of Jadon Sancho or Marcus Rashford. We're going to see Bellingham somehow get on the pitch over arguably top 100 world players.
Sure. Yeah, I can see that. And he'll say it's to solidify the midfield to hold the results.
I'm not saying he's bad, but I just
Dave asked if they played from behind. They have not played from behind yet. They have not conceded yet. They've got all clean sheets so far. So they have not trailed yet. So that could be also something that could become very interesting. Should they fall behind, how do they react? Do they implode?
That's a great point as well, because we haven't seen them have to deal with any sort of adversity yet.
Right.
But again, I mean, that's the way it's set up. Like the Ukraine, again, should pose no problem.
Right.
The Danes or the Czechs should pose no problem. Italy is going to be their biggest matchup, or Belgium if, especially if Kevin De Bruyne is healthy.
Yeah. And Germany were not able to put them in that situation today, and that was the most likely team in their path that would get a lead on them.
And as you said, they should have. I mean,
should have. They didn't
100% to have that goal.
Yeah. So
I mean, that would have changed everything about the game. But
all right.
Hey, so fair play to them. I think they're going to win it. I'm putting another future on it, another unit. I think they're plus 170 right now, which is insane value for a team that will not face serious competition till the final outside of heart. So, All
right. So the quarterfinals are set. We got Friday, Switzerland versus Spain. It's a noon Eastern time kickoff, 9 Pacific. Then the late game is Belgium and Italy. And then Saturday, Czech Republic in the early game against Denmark, and Ukraine, England in the late game. So we're coming down to about 5 more episodes of this Euro podcast, because there's not many match days
it's wild,
left.
Right?
It is wild. It has flown by. I did want to talk a little Copa America tonight.
Tell me.
Since the group stage concluded last night, we had Bolivia 1, Argentina 4, and Messi gets 2 goals in this one.
What a surprise.
One is a penalty, one is a chip.
Beautiful.
You also get a goal from Alejandro Gomez and another one from Lautaro Martinez. All right. Bolivia get a consolation goal, but they're done. By far the weakest team in the group. And then Uruguay beat Paraguay 1-0. Their goal comes from Cavani from the penalty spot. So Copa America has their quarterfinals set up, so I'll just read those off now that they have played this marathon group stage of where you play 4 matches to eliminate 1 team per group. So 4 out of 5 teams in each group have advanced. So they start their quarterfinals on Friday as well. Literally, so it's like you got Euros at, if we're on the Eastern time, Euros at 12, and at 3, and then Copa America at 5 and at 8. So we literally have 8 hours of football on Friday. Peru versus Paraguay in the first one, and then the hosts Brazil take on Chile. And then Saturday, Uruguay versus Colombia and Argentina versus Ecuador. So, I mean, for me, this is where the tournament starts for real.
Yeah.
Venezuela and Bolivia have been eliminated. Brazil have to be heavy favorites playing at home and having the most informed team right now, although they did just drop 2 points to Ecuador.
Yep.
But they were also heavily rotated squad. They had won the previous 3 games, had already won the group. Argentina won their group, so CONMEBOL got what they wanted. Argentina and Brazil separated so that they potentially meet in the final. That's what a very CONCACAF-like approach.
Yeah, that's what they wanted. Big surprise.
Exactly. It's just like CONCACAF making sure the U.S. and Mexico don't meet before the final of any tournament.
Yep.
Okay, DGens United says, I don't really want to have this discussion about Messi versus Ronaldo. I don't know how you feel about it, but
I agree.
It's getting so old that, like, I don't know.
I agree.
It shouldn't count. Well, here's where
level of competition.
Yeah.
That's all I'm saying.
There have been a lot more Copa Americas. Sometimes they play every 2 years. Sometimes it's every 3. There was one where there was one in 2015 and then another in 2016, then another in 2019. So to that extent, yes, I will agree with that. But I'm really tired of that argument, to be honest. We're going on what, 10, 12 years of it. And
yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think he's right just because to win in Europe is I think he's correct. I think to win in Europe is so much harder than to win the Copa America, especially when you play for an Argentina team that outside of Brazil, most of the time, no one's even close to your class.
Yeah. It's like, a big difference.
Are you telling me, him scoring twice against Bolivia, that's impressive? Ronaldo scoring, now he's scored against Germany. He's scored against France. He's scored, it's like, I don't know. But that's also because I believe he's the greatest of all time.
Yeah, I agree with that. It's just there's a big difference between winning a Euro with Portugal, who are a small country, to winning a Copa America with Argentina, who are the second most successful team behind Uruguay in the history of the competition, because this competition goes way back before Brazil was even a powerhouse, and Uruguay and Argentina won a number of them before Brazil became a real player in the 1950s. So,
I don't get me wrong. I believe Messi is.
He's
I
phenomenal.
believe it's an argument. I believe it's an argument.
Sure.
But I'm just saying you can't compare the Copa America to the Euros. Like
especially in this situation where you've got some teams completely depleted from COVID. They've got entire reserve teams in there. You've got empty stadiums, and it's a tournament that was put on literally to pay off the TV rights that were purchased. That's the only reason they played this.
And think about this as well, is a way that you can tell, going back to the level of competition, is like how many South American teams are going far in the World Cup every year, or every time they play. Not many. And usually it's Argentina or Brazil, one of them. And other than that, it's all European teams.
And as of late, they have not really. Well, Argentina got to the final in 2014, but
and Brazil got to the semifinal and got worked.
Yeah, but in 2018, they both went out fairly early. So
and didn't Argentina go out on to who'd they go out to? Someone.
They went out to France.
Was it France?
Yeah. The last one, they were beaten 5-3 by France. And
I remember that Pavard strike.
Yeah.
Was dope. You can't really compare the two competitions. One's much better than the other. It's JV and varsity. Fair enough. But that doesn't mean that the Copa is not fantastic. I love the last couple of rounds of the Copa, because you have the one thing I will say about Copa America versus the Euros is that it feels like, and way more often than not, every game is a rivalry.
Yeah.
All those countries fucking hate each other.
Oh, yeah. They want to beat each other.
Obviously not like that.
No. We talked about that, how the players are so friendly with each other, regardless of what countries that's not. And the South American players all know each other too, but when it's time to show up and play, they have a different attitude. They put those friendships aside for those 90 minutes. You see Suarez and Angel Gomez are not going to be talking just because they're Atletico Madrid teammates. They're not going to be talking in the tunnel for 20 minutes before the match. They're completely focused on what they have to do. Those, like you said, those rivalries mean something.
They run deep.
And they run deep, and they don't. It doesn't matter if it's a Copa final, if it's a friendly. Argentina does not want to lose to Uruguay. Uruguay does not want to lose to Brazil. Brazil does not want to lose to Uruguay. Those three nations have such a rivalry, and they don't want to give anything away. And it could be a pickup match in a park, and it's going to turn real for them.
And look at the way that a great way you can tell that is after matches, they do not go and hug and kick it with each other for a while. The way you see in some of the Euro matches,
they
where
usually end by throwing punches. Actually, there's a lot of bench clearing in South America. It ends in a much more emotional, passionate ending. And in this podcast, I've covered a lot of South American football because I've recognized there's not many people talking South American football in English out there. So I saw hey, here's where I could maybe get an audience, or here's just what I want to talk about because it's something different than the same 5 or 6 teams winning all the time. So it is fun to watch this because I'm familiar with some of these players that play in South America, but again, it is missing something. You can't ignore the obvious. The tournament's missing people, and it feels like every other match we've seen in the last year and a half versus the Euro that feels like something special because we're getting crowds, even if they're not full. Even if they're a third, they sound like a crowd again. And in some matches, we're getting full crowds, which is fantastic considering how long it's been. But I think it's set up pretty nicely for a Brazil versus Argentina final, although Uruguay and Colombia stand in the way of that. They match up in the bracket with Argentina. So I expect Argentina to get by Ecuador. I expect Brazil to get by Chile. And Peru got to the final last time, but I don't see them giving Brazil too hard of a time in this semifinal. And I think it's going to be an exciting last four. I think when you get there, it's going to have a new level to it. And, of course, they were smart. They're playing their semifinals Monday and Tuesday versus Tuesday, whereas the Euro is Tuesday and Wednesday. And then Copa America is playing their final on Saturday. So we'll have a Copa America final on a Saturday, the 10th. And then on the 11th, we have the Euro final. So lots of football still to come. But, yeah, we're down to about five more episodes of this. It's been a blast though. These tournaments do fly by. All right, you want to plug anything on the way out tonight?
Hey, just keep listening to the pod, and thanks for having me on. And I just I'm excited to see how this turns out. I think Saturday and Friday are going to be very, very interesting. I hope at least.
I agree. I definitely agree. And so we will be back Friday. All right. There'll be nothing. I'm not going to do a preview show Thursday because we just previewed the quarterfinals. Essentially, we've talked about each matchup as they've come along. So we'll be back Friday night, guys. Friday and Saturday, and then we'll be at the semifinals at that point. Make sure you follow him. He's at Fade My Play. I'm at PTB_media. If you're watching on YouTube, hit the subscribe button and then hit the little bell there. Tap it so that you can get an alert when we go live. Okay. And don't forget to check out the website, www.parkingthebusmedia.com. That's going to do it for this episode 59. We'll see you Friday.